What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. And today on the show, we're talking about UFC Saudi Arabia. It's going down Riyadh season in the UFC, and it's Robert the Reaper Whittaker, Bobby Knuckles, as we like to call him over here on this program, taking on Ikram Aliskerov. It was supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev. Unfortunately, he fell ill before the fight. They needed to scramble, get a last notice replacement. That has been a theme lately in the UFC. And Ikram steps up here on short notice. He was supposed to fight last weekend against a poker player. I'm kidding, of course. That guy's still going to fight in the UFC, so all love and respect to him. But for whatever reason, fight gets scrapped, gets pulled, and instead Ikram Aliskerov takes a huge step up in competition. No other way to describe it, right? He was going to be fighting, in a co-main event against an unranked fighter. He's now going to be fighting in a 5-round main event against a former champion in Robert Whittaker. So in terms of his opportunity, you can't ask for much more, right? He's stepping up in a huge way. He gets a big platform and a big showcase against a dangerous fighter, but a guy that, the odds makers are reflecting the fact that they believe this will be a competitive fight. They believe this is a fight that Ikram Aliskerov can win. And you have to think that Robert Whittaker is the much more known quantity coming into this bout, right? You just look at the fact that he's had so many fights in the UFC. He's 25-7 overall as a professional. But when you look at his UFC record, 16-5. I mean, just a sensational record inside the promotion, winning more than he's losing, oftentimes fighting the very best guys in the division, top 5 guys, top 10 guys. You look at his last 5 fights in the promotion, he's 3-2 over those last 5. His losses, of course, to champions, Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis. Both were able to get the better of him. Both were able to finish him at various points in his career, but he's been very durable. He's gotten great quality wins like Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori, Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier, Darren Till. I mean, these were all guys that were ranked in the top of the middleweight division at the time that he fought them. So they were relevant. They were meaningful. Many of them were scheduled to go 5-minute rounds. So I think that is all, what leads lends credence, to a guy like Robert Whittaker and what he's accomplished, his resume, all the things he's done in the sport. He's a great fighter. He's a proven great fighter. But I do think there's a chance we've seen the best of Robert Whittaker already, right? When he's had so many fights in the promotion, 21 fights with the promotion, we saw a good performance against Paulo Costa last time out, but he got hurt badly in the first round. We did see a little bit of vulnerability. And if there was a criticism you would lodge at a guy like Robert Whittaker, who is so talented, when you're talking about a championship level fighter, you have to start picking with a fine-tooth comb for what are their weaknesses, what are their flaws. I think Robert Whittaker is a guy that can be hurt. He can be hit, he can be touched, he can feel the power from his opponents. He typically is so tough, so durable, so willing to move through that uncomfortable situation that he survives. But he's been rocked a number of times. If we just go back and look at the records, right? Paulo Costa rocked him badly with that spinning kick. Dricus du Plessis, I mean, he beat the tar out of him on the ground. He did finish him on the feet as well, but a lot of damage incurred in that fight. Marvin Vettori, he just smoked him. I bet on Marvin Vettori that night. One of the worst bets of my life. I bet on Marvin big. I thought that he could go out there and maybe test the chin, and that confirmed for me something that we have all long speculated. This guy, Marvin Vettori, just don't have real power, right? Then you look at a guy like Israel Adesanya. And Israel Adesanya went out there and landed hard shots on Whittaker. He did hurt Whittaker, but Whittaker showed better ability to deal with that in the second fight with Adesanya. Obviously, the first time he got knocked out twice in a fight that didn't last 7.5 minutes. So you look at how Robert's progressed. He's done a better job even managing dangerous threats like Adesanya. But you look back at the Darren Till fight, he got flashed badly in that fight. He got hurt by Jared Cannonier, another dangerous striker, another powerful middleweight, but he did get hurt badly in that fight, and he was a little bit on the ropes. Yoel Romero, I mean, those guys took pieces from each other, just absolutely chipping away at each other over the course of 2 brutal 25-minute fights. And so my question is just, what does Robert Whittaker have left to give? At this stage of his career? I believe that the UFC had booked that fight with Khamzat Chimaev as a real test, right? A rubber meeting the road, so to speak. Either we're going to find out this guy, Khamzat Chimaev, doesn't really have the takedowns. He doesn't really have the grappling to beat the best guys in the division. And maybe the cardio's not there. Maybe he's not able to keep up this pace over a longer period of time. You know that Robert Whittaker can go out there and compete with somebody, strike on the feet. But I think it was going to be the rubber meeting the road, where can Robert Whittaker take the shots from this guy when he's aggressive, when he's wild early, and he's throwing those big haymakers like we've seen Chimaev do, take out Gerald Mearshart, take out a couple of these guys. Maybe they're not ranked as high in the division, but what you see is just Chimaev deleting people with one shot. Even Ikram Aliskerov, who's across from him on Saturday night, right? Ikram, his only loss, his blemish in mixed martial arts, is getting chinned by Khamzat Chimaev in the first round. So when I saw this fight get booked, I honestly believe the UFC wanted a spectacular knockout. Hey, Khamzat Chimaev, go out there and show people that you're as good as they say you are. Go out there and really earn this. Get a title shot by, starching a guy like Robert Whittaker and really showing yourself to be a class above. And I think that if you look at Chimaev's career in context, obviously we're going to talk about Ikram Aliskerov, the guy who stepped in, but I'm talking about the original booking because this was a short notice replacement. And I just want to give a little bit of the full context. And when I'm thinking about a guy like Chimaev, he really didn't get his due after the Usman fight. And the reason being is Usman gave him a hell of a run. And late in the fight, Usman started to push him. Usman started to get a little bit going back in his direction. And it looked like Chimaev might have tired out. Everybody said if it was 5 rounds, we know how this one would have gone. But the one thing I think gone unremarked from that fight is that Chimaev had injured his wrist and his hand in the first round when he was looking to finish Usman, right? He's on his back. He's got great positions. He's looking to go for the choke. He's looking to reposition his, his finish. And then all of a sudden, Usman takes a risk, right? Falls forward, a lot of weight, and he tries to base out on his hand and his wrist. And he didn't feel the same after that. You saw him not being as persistent and aggressive with his grappling. It's very hard to grapple when you can't grip, right? When you can't use one of your hands to control and to grab. So I think that was what ended up costing Chimaev, potentially a dominant first round finish in that fight against Usman. So for me, that's where I wanted to temper a little bit of the criticism and say, this is the one where I'm not going to bet on Chimaev against Whittaker, but I'm going to pick him to win the fight, and I'm going to see how this one shakes out. Now, when you have a guy like Robert Whittaker and he's got all this experience, he's way more proven, tested at this level, but he does have, some flaws and some vulnerabilities, right? I mentioned the fact he can get touched on the chin a little bit. The other question I have about Robert Whittaker is, what does his wrestling and grappling look like if a fight gets pushed to the ground? One thing that was apparent about Dricus du Plessis is that he doesn't always use the most technical approach to his jiu-jitsu, right? Sometimes he uses aggression and raw power more than he's using technique, but there's also a very technical approach. And we did see him outthink and outposition, as well as out-brute strength and out-physical a guy like Robert Whittaker, both in the clinch where he was able to hit that hip toss, the head and arm step through throw, but also how he was able to pass the guard on the ground, how he was able to beat him up with elbows. He used some of my favorite sequencing where he's looking to set up the Darce choke, and in mixed martial arts, your options are so much more plentiful, right? In grappling setting, people will just base out their neck and try and get really stiff, and it becomes difficult to finish that Darce. Basically, what Dricus was saying was, no problem. You don't want to go with the Darce. Hold these elbows, and it was a brutal assault from the top position. I think that the KO in round 2 was almost like the Adesanya fight, right? Whereas elementary, when he came back out for round 2, that things were already, moving in the wrong direction, trending the wrong way in that fight, and had a lot of pain and damage. So shout out to John in the chat here as we introduce Ikram as a character in this main event. He says double weight cut for Ikram. 1 week ago, he was supposed to fight in Vegas. Now in Saudi, that's a 10-hour time difference. Our guy, MMA Line Mover, says he did not cut weight. I'm curious if either one of you guys has a source. I'd love to read more about that situation. But here's what I can say, right? You got a guy in Ikram Aliskerov. I said already, he's basically got nothing to lose in terms of expectations. I don't think people expect him to beat Robert Whittaker, especially on short notice, right? You look at the Tapology votes, 73% of voters are going with Robert Whittaker to get the job done here. And Robert Whittaker, he's a public guy. He's a public side every time he fights. And he mostly comes through, right? Even as a favorite, even in these situations, you've just seen a lot of times like Robert Whittaker has been, solid. He's been a producer. But let's go through and look at his performances in terms of the betting odds, because that's always something I like to take a look at as well. You see a guy like Robert Whittaker, he's 8-2 for a 22% ROI as a favorite in the UFC. That's just a fantastic run, and it does deserve a lot of weight and a lot of credence coming into a matchup like this. Average odds of -202, so you're getting a discount on what his average price would be in the UFC. Then you have to ask yourself the question, why is that? And I think the answer is as simple as this. Ikram Aliskerov has a lot of potential. He's a bit of an unknown in this UFC space, right? 2-0 in the promotion. Neither one of those wins would jump off the paper at you like Warlley Alves, a guy that you definitely think of as good fighter, talented, but beatable. Then you think of a guy like Phil Hawes, good fighter, talented, but beatable. And his chin maybe not all that it's cracked up to be or needs to be. Mario Sousa, a guy who simply was not of this level. And Ikram was heavily favored to win these fights, right? So shout out to my guy Pepe, says Ikram sub could be cheeky. If you go through his record, Rob hasn't faced many submission grapplers. This is the exact point I raised on Twitter a few days ago, Pepe, which is just a question, right? I like to raise questions. I'm always thinking about these fights in terms of, how could they go? What could go wrong? What could people be missing? And the thing I thought to myself first and foremost about this fight was, can Ikram Aliskerov replicate some of the success of Dricus du Plessis? Who initiated the clinch in that fight? This is a quiz, pop quiz for everybody in the chat. Who initiated the clinch between Dricus du Plessis and Robert Whittaker? It was Robert Whittaker that initiated the clinch, but the guy who took advantage of the clinch, the guy who succeeded in the clinch was Dricus du Plessis. So I think that Robert Whittaker has this style of crashing forward, getting close to people. There's definitely things about his game that can work against Ikram Aliskerov. We saw Ikram go out there and look very good against Phil Hawes, and he looked good against Warlley Alves. But it's not like he doesn't take some shots in his fights. His defense standing, I would say, is his biggest liability. That is the biggest target for Robert Whittaker in this fight. In my humble opinion, he wants to go out there and try and put a hurt on this guy, land big shots on the feet with the hands as well as with the kicks. Because we saw Phil Hawes, if you guys go back and rewatch that fight, he landed some good body shots. He landed some good open side kicks. He was switching stances. He was moving around. He was having success with his lead right hook. But the problem for Phil ultimately was, number one, he couldn't take the shots on the return. But number two, what you want to understand about this guy is, Phil Hawes was out there switching stances, doing a lot, and willing to trade in exchange. Robert Whittaker tends to be a lot more in and out with his footwork. But when you're able to pressure a guy like Robert Whittaker and kind of cut off the blitzes, counter him as he's coming in, those are the fights where he's had a lot of success. Or if you're able to get into a set position to counter him. Meaning, if you watch back the Israel Adesanya fight, the way Izzy was able to catch Rob was actually to invite the blitz and pull back, right? He would invite the blitz and then step back into his stance. And from a retreated stance, he would start firing the hooks. It almost looked like his chin was way up in the air, but the truth was he was well out of range, right? He would pull Rob into range and Rob would think he was there. Then he would pull back and start throwing these dangerous hooks, and he would crack him. And Ikram Aliskerov, sometimes he takes a lot of risk in the pocket, right? And I do think that is what ultimately got him clipped by Khamzat Chimaev, was that openness with his hands and the looseness and the, thinking about his offense first. He did get cracked up the middle with an uppercut. That is a line of attack that's open on Ikram, but he can kick, he can strike with his hands, and he can counter quite well. So then you have to start asking yourself, okay, can he replicate some of those things on top? Can he get some takedowns like du Plessis was able to? Du Plessis is extremely physical, right? He's a great athlete, but we've also seen du Plessis get taken down before. We've seen du Plessis get muscled around a little bit as well. He's very big and physical and strong, and he can do freakish athletic things, but he also makes positional mistakes. He also does some things wrong at times that end up in bad situations. He also spends energy inefficiently at times and gets himself gassed out. Ikram Aliskerov is a little bit more patient, I would say, in his grappling approach, right? On the feet, he takes some risks, but on the grappling approach, he's very lethal and dangerous, right? He's got a very clinical game, and he could also be, just relentless with the ground and pound if he needs to. So he just seems to me like a difficult guy to fight, right? And if you ask Robert Whittaker, what's interesting is Robert Whittaker says, this is a tougher fight for me than Khamzat Chimaev. And I think that it's worth taking Rob's opinion seriously, right? He's the one who signed to fight him. He's got the right to an opinion. And I think that a guy like Ikram What he could bring to the table that's a little different than Chimaev is Chimaev, we know, is front-loaded, intense success. And that's what we've seen from Ikram so far in the UFC. But we've seen as recently as a couple fights outside the UFC, he can go to the decision, he can grind it out, win a 29-28. It's not like Robert Whittaker in every fight that he's won has blown people out of the water, right? There's been a lot of fights for Robert Whittaker where he wins 49-46, 29-28. He just gets a couple more rounds, close fights, back and forth. And it just seems to me like you got a guy in Ikram Aliskerov with everything to gain and nothing to lose. Hard guy to fade at an underdog price tag. That guy's going to go out there. He's going to go fight for everything. I think the crowd is going to be vocally behind him in this fight as well. And he's a big guy. He's a strong guy. He's got knockout power. He's got submission ability. I don't think he's dead if this goes to the cards. So it just seems to me like the way I fundamentally cap MMA, it's a dog or pass situation. Now, I want to give this disclosure. I'm bad at betting on Robert Whittaker fights long term. I have not done well. I've tried to fade him on a number of occasions. It hasn't gone my way. You guys heard the stat I read off, 8-2 as a favorite, right? If I've bet against him as a favorite a bunch of those times, he's just been taking my money, right? So I'm not saying I'm bullish on fading Rob. I've kind of learned my lesson about fading Rob. It's like you got to really pick your spots with this guy. I had Duplessis plus 300. It's not like I'm a fool every time, but most of the time when you look at my results, I just haven't had a lot of success fading this guy, so I don't want to be super eager to do it. Now, when you look at the Ikram side, I have had some success betting on Ikram when he first got to the Contender Series, right? I said he was going to submit Mario Sousa. I wrote that up. That was my prediction. That came to fruition as well pretty easily. Quick cash there. And I think it was plus 200 on the submission. I had said him inside the distance. There was a steal at minus 200. Then you see the next few fights he has in the UFC. He's like minus 600, minus 900, whatever he is. So there's a lot that goes into, these kind of breakdowns. And I think that Robert Whittaker, capable of winning the fight, absolutely, probably deserves to be favored based on the credentials, based on what's been proven. But I would probably cap him at about a minus 115, a minus 120 here. I think this is anybody's fight to win. I think maybe on preparation, again, maybe you steer towards that minus 125 Whittaker, but I really can't get far beyond that. I want to shout out my friends over at Fight Numbers. They've got the odds today for the show. I want to shout out the great work that they've been doing. The handicappers on their team, they've been crushing it. They've been killing it. So shout out to Pepe, Ozzy, Evan, John, the entire crew over there. Good people. But on top of that, the tools, the resources keep getting better every week. Shout out to my guy Pepe in the chat as well. One of the sharpest in the game. He came on the other day. We did bets and banter together. We had an absolutely banner episode. So appreciate my guy Pepe as well for stopping by with the great information. Now, as far as this fight goes, I want to shout you guys the best numbers available. And this is, again, right from our friends over at Fight Numbers. Code Liam. If you guys want to have the same information I'm looking at, they'll hook you up with 30% off that first month's membership. Now, what we're looking at here is the best available price, minus 148 over on Unibet. That is going to be on the Robert Whittaker side. He's favored to win the bout. You've got Ikram Aliskerov plus 140 at Bet Online. One of the sharpest outfits in the world. They're taking big bets now, plus 140 on the Ikram Aliskerov side. So interesting to say the least. In terms of the over-under for this main event, guys, I'm looking at a 2.5 total, minus 142 to the juice over 2.5 rounds at FanDuel. And then you're looking at an under plus 140 Superbook Sports, best available price of the under 2.5. So fascinating odds, fascinating fight. I think for me, my gut right now is telling me Ikram Aliskerov, but I'm acknowledging to you guys, disclosing right up front, I have not been successful fading Robert Whittaker in the past. So if I do it here, it's going to be with some trepidation. It's going to be with some hesitance. But I also just always have to go fight by fight, believe in my reads, believe in my gut, and take it one fight at a time. So if it situationally seems like I have to take Ikram, then eventually I'll take Ikram. But right now, I'm going to wait and see what happens with this line. I do think publicly there will be a lot of enthusiasm on the Whittaker side. I do not think the average person that watches UFC knows who an Ikram Aliskerov is. I don't know that they could pick him out of a lineup. But if you've been like me watching since the Khamzat Chimaev days, you've had an eye on this kid and you've known Ikram Aliskerov is for real. He's a big game player. He's the guy that was going to matter eventually. I put out a tweet I think it was in January. I could be mistaken. Maybe it was February. But I had basically said earlier this year, if you could buy stock in one of these undefeated in the UFC middleweights, who would you buy stock in? And Ikram Aliskerov, Bo Nickel, Roman Kopylov were among those guys. And when you look, Roman Kopylov obviously suffered a setback. So you've seen these guys, it's hard to stay undefeated in the UFC in these middleweight divisions or on a good run. If you're trying to buy these, stocks in somebody that's been on a nice run, it's hard to always project exactly where they're going to go. But then we saw a guy like Kopylov bounce back, right? A guy like Ikram Aliskerov, now he's taking a huge step up. Maybe it's too much. Maybe he's going to be humbled here. But I think that he's got real skills. I think he's hungry. I think he believes in himself. I think he's got a lot of confidence. And I think he's flying into a place where they're going to support him, vocally. So I don't think it's as bad as some other situations, right? You could be flying into hostile territory on short notice where everybody wants to see you fail. I think they're going to try and lift him up and support him. And I think that Ikram Aliskerov, if you listen to how other people that are professionals, that are legitimate, perceive him as well, Daniel Cormier is on the broadcast talking about, it's irresponsible if we put him in here again with a guy who's not in the top 15 because he's going to hurt these guys. He's going to finish them in the first round. And that's what we've seen so far. So he deserves a step up in competition, but it could always be a case of too much too soon. It's not like he's the favorite though, right? So it is like people believe in Robert Whittaker, deservedly so, but this is where the rubber meets the road. And I think this is a very hard fight for the former champion. So I'm leaning early this week with Ikram Aliskerov to get it done in the main event, but no slight to the Aussie. I think it's a great fight, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it go either way. So I think it should be pretty closely lined. Next up, guys, we got Sergei the Refrigerator Pavlovich taking on Alexander Drago Volkov. And this is a fascinating fight for a lot of reasons, right? Sometimes fights are fascinating because you think it's going to be great action. Sometimes they're fascinating because you're trying to get a beat on what exactly you're looking at, right? And you've got these two guys that are both very talented heavyweights, but why do I not feel great about betting on this fight? I'll make it plain and simple and pretty short and to the point. These guys are friends. I never know if friends are going to go out there and fight or if it's going to be a dance. Right, we've seen guys in the PFL basically put on what could only be described as a unserious attempt at a fight, where it's more about scoring little ta-ta, from the outside than trying to hurt somebody. And I get it. Listen, I don't want to hurt my friends, but this is a business, right? And this is a fight business. And it's a spot where, for me, if I'm going to involve my money in a fight, I want to know that somebody wants to win the fight, right? For me, it makes it a dog or pass situation, in part because a guy like Sergei Pavlovich is heavily favored to win the fight. He's a dangerous guy. He's got knockout power, powerful guy, but he's a guy that I don't like to bet on in a big chalk price range. And the reason being is we don't know about his cardio down the stretch, right? He tends to knock people out in the first round. And we have seen him in one fight get taken down and absolutely dominated from the top position by Alistair Overeem. And then nobody's really gotten the opportunity to take him down since, right? He got flatlined by Tom Aspinall, no skin off your nose, right? That's the guy who's at the top of the division right now. So you say, hey, it happens. It's heavyweight. But then the Curtis Blades fight, we didn't really get much of a wrestling clinic there, right? It was more just they swung it out on the feet. Pavlovich gets it done. Bada bing, bada boom. Then you look at Pavlovich in his other fights. I mean, he's fighting bona fide strikers, knocking them out in the first round, but he's not really showing you that he has like this well-rounded, deep MMA game that if it goes 15 minutes, just wait until you see my Uchimatas and wait until there's just all these skills that we don't know about for Pavlovich. He looks the goods. He's physically very strong. He has a background in wrestling. I've seen him take people down on the regional scene way back in the day, but for me, he's turned into a boxer, a knockout round one type of guy, and he's fighting a friend. Does he want to go out there and knock out Volkov in the first round? Maybe he does. Maybe they just set it aside and that's business and they shake hands and he beats the shit out of him and that's the end of the fight, But I don't really see that, right? I see two guys that are like, shaking hands and they're like, putting hugs around each other and smiles. I saw something too where they put out a UFC promo package and they said that these guys hadn't sparred together in 18 months. It's like 18 months. That's not that long ago. It's like a college teammate, it's like it's like somebody that you knew recently. That seems to me like two guys that could go out there and put on a stinker, could go out there and maybe it's Volkov against Tabura, right? Where they just clinch control and wrestle and spin each other in circles like it's the waltz around the outside of the octagon, Shout out to the chat. Kristen says, if Volkov was in front of me, I could hide behind his leg. He is a very tall fighter. We got Just Win Baby says no chick fights. They don't like women in Saudi or what? Probably something along those lines. I would guess the UFC would have brought them otherwise. I bet Ikram at anything over plus 180 tend to fade short notice, so it's hard to get to. I think that makes a lot of sense, Nate. I wouldn't, rule out that the line will go that high, but I just don't know what to make of this line at the current limits, right? Because I do see a lot of love on Whittaker. I'm not seeing the line react accordingly quite yet, so we'll see how that changes throughout the course of the week. Shout out to our guy Pepe as well, says that GTD is interesting here. I would tend to agree. When you're looking at the odds, let's talk about fight numbers and the odds for this bout, right? Alexander Volkov, you're looking at a plus 205 on a couple different sports books. Looks like Caesars is the one that is at the top here. Then you're seeing Sergei Pavlovich minus 225 favorite over on BetMGM. So this is a competitive fight, right? Over under 1.5 rounds is currently juiced to the under at Circa Sportsbook minus 145 to the under best available. And you're looking at a plus 130 from Superbook Sports, the best available over price. So a couple things that interest me on this fight. Number one, thinking about how you could get creative to the market. We've seen a guy like Volkov go out there and introduce, new layers to his game. We've seen that a guy like, Pavlovich, he's a refrigerator, right? You don't want a refrigerator on top of you, but if a refrigerator's laying down on the ground, it's going to be very hard for it to get back up, right? And so we have seen, he got TKO'd on the ground by Alistair Overeem just because he simply had no answers when he was flat on his back. Something to consider there on the Volkov side. Now, in terms of the Pavlovich side, in terms of his long-term development, it would be nice to see Pavlovich go out there and win a 15-minute fight, go out there and show that he could do that. But it's also something where you lose a little bit of what makes you great if you don't go out there and explode on people, right? He's a guy that is dangerous enough to finish any heavyweight in the first round. He landed a couple of shots on Aspinall too, but he's also taken a lot of risks. He's putting his chin up in the air sometimes. I think he's a good boxer. He's talented. He's long, but he's also a guy that is probably not going to compete with Volkov very much at kicking range. And I don't know how the wrestling would play out between these two men. You would have to assume Pavlovich a little bit stronger, a little bit lower center of gravity could favor him. But then you just see Volkov has a bitter pedigree on the mat, right? He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, if not black belt. He's a guy that's worked in some takedowns in his recent fights. He's also D'd up a lot of takedowns. If you look at a guy like Marcin Tybura in that fight I mentioned, the reason there were so many, exchanges in the wrestling, Tybura tried to take him down over and over and just couldn't get past square one. I think it was like 12 takedowns shut down in that fight from a pretty tepid, uninspired effort from Volkov. I think we've seen a little bit better from him in his recent fights. So if we pull up Volkov's recent record, he is 35 going on 36. That for me is a little bit concerning, but we're not talking about a weight class like flyweight. We're talking about a weight class like, heavyweight, where these guys tend to have longer careers, stick around for a while. This guy has, a ton of professional fights, almost 50 professional fights compared to just 20 for Sergei Pavlovich. So a lot more, competition miles inside the octagon, but he's also going to be the taller athlete. Longer reach will go with Sergei Pavlovich here, but a lot of people are picking Pavlovich. They're picking him to get it done via knockout. And I just think that Volkov has earned our respect. He's won 3 fights in a row, submitted Tai Tuivasa, knocked out Alexander Romanov in the first round, knocked out Jairzinho Rozenstruik as well. And he lost to Tom Aspinall via submission, right? He didn't get put away in quite the same way that Pavlovich did. They were having a fight on the feet, and all of a sudden, Aspinall shows that speed, that ability to level change. And we never saw a takedown defense from Volkov in that fight because he was so quickly flat on his back. Volkov got the BJJ belts, but one of them been subbed 3 times. Yeah, that's fair play. The thing about Pavlovich is he's never been submitted, but he has been dominated on the ground. He's also not really fought a submission-based fighter, I would argue, in his UFC run. Marcelo Gome, Maurice Green, Shamil Abdurakhimov, Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, and Curtis Blades. I mean, I don't know if any of them has a UFC win by sub under their name. Maybe Mo Green against what's his name? John Vellante. So Pav by Kimura, so nobody gets KO'd. Yeah, I don't mind that. I actually think the ends by sub could be interesting. You got 2 guys that are friends, don't want to hurt each other. There's always some merit to that, but also the GTD that some people talked about. It's weird for a fight like this because both guys are clear finishers, but again, just friends fighting is a weird dynamic, and it's something that I find you don't want to ignore in these fights. You want to take it under advisement. So not a fight that I have a ton to say, but I just think from a money line standpoint, I'm never laying minus 225. With a guy like Pavlovich, based on the unknowns, based on the problems he could have if a fight gets extended. But I've made plenty of money on him, betting on him as a dog. So when he's back in underdog prices, I'll probably be back betting on him. But for now, let's see if the public sentiment is a little too bullish on this guy. But yeah, I will say he went to decision multiple times pre-UFC, but a lot of those guys, I was not very impressed. I did watch those fights. I did even pick him against Aspinall. I thought he was going to win that fight. But for me, just a little bit too aggressive, the pricing on this one. I do think he's a better athlete than Volkov, though. Next up, guys, we got Kelvin Gastelum taking on Daniel Rodriguez. This is a very strange fight. Obviously, Kelvin Gastelum is a lot closer to his prime. You see a guy like Daniel Rodriguez, he's 37 years of age. I think the whole rub was that he had never been knocked out in all these prison fights and all these things. He was just like impossible to kill. Then he gets knocked out, of course, by Ian Machado Gary, a guy that gets no respect. But the thing that was, for me, really alarming was the fact that D-Rod got finished by Neil Magny. I think I bet Neil Magny plus 680 to win that fight inside the distance, just because I was like, it's a welterweight fight, How unlikely could somebody be to win inside the distance? And when you look at a guy like D-Rod, he's a dangerous guy at his best. He does have some good wins in the UFC. There was a time he was on a nice win streak as well, right? He comes into the UFC off the Contender Series, right? And he beat, he didn't even get signed off the Contender Series, but he had fought on Contender. Then he comes in, he beats Tim Means, he beats Gabe Green, he beats Dwight Grant. So I would say none of those wins are really standout. But then he loses a very close and I would say somewhat controversial decision to Nicholas Dalby. It was a very close fight. Unanimous decision, though, goes the way of Dalby. And I had bet on him that night. And that was what kind of told me, I was like, you know what? I'm too bullish on this guy. He's got some fundamentals with his grappling, right? He knows how to pull off a guillotine. He's got long limbs. He's got some power. He's not afraid to fight. So those are all positives. But you look at the Mike Perry fight, a win that's aged great. The Preston Parsons fight, another win that's aged pretty well, right? He beat the tar out of that guy. Kevin Lee, I think I bet D-Rod as an underdog against Kevin Lee that night. And it was because Kevin was talking about you're too little and like all these things. And I was like, dude, he looks way bigger than you. And I don't feel like you have the cardio to push this for the full 15 minutes. So then I'm like, okay, the Li Jingliang fight, everybody on the night thought he didn't win that fight. Almost everybody was sure he lost that fight the night of. And, credit to him, right? He gets his hand raised by any means necessary, wins the split decision. I thought he looked poor against Neil Magny. I did not think that was a good showing. I did not think that Ian Machado Gary was going to knock him out so easily in the first round, but he was getting his timing quickly. A head kick to the face. I mean, what are you going to do, right? We'll write that one off. Sean Brady dominating Kelvin Gastelum on the mat. That's something I'm willing to look the other way. I'm willing to say, hey, Sean Brady is a special talent when it comes to the ground game, when it comes to his wrestling and his grappling. For me, I just don't know why there's so much bullish enthusiasm on a guy like Kelvin. I mean, I like Kelvin, right? Well enough. I think he's a fun guy. I think he's a nice guy. I'm sure interpersonally he's fun to hang out with, but you just got to call a spade a spade. And when your only wins in the UFC in the last few years are Chris Curtis, Ian Heinisch, Jacare Souza, and Michael Bisping since 2017, how are you minus 200 to win a UFC fight, right? It becomes a difficult question. And when you're looking at the answers, I think some of it lies in the quality of competition. His losses along that same period of time since 2017 are Chris Weidman, Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson, Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier, and Sean Brady. And only Sean Brady and Jack Hermanson of that list have not fought for the title. They're both submission threats, and that has typically been the thing that gets Kelvin Gastelum. He's not a very good submission grappler. He can be exploited in those positions. And when you look at his striking, he's also not a runaway striker, right? He could go out there and have just a pure stand-up kickboxing match for 15 minutes with a lot of guys in the division. He's not coming up aces. So I don't like what I see from Kelvin, just in terms of his overall game. I'm not sure where he's at. I'm not sure what his real skill level is. He's a smaller guy by a sizable margin coming into this fight. I think aside from his age and his youthfulness and his quality of competition, there's no reason to favor Kelvin Gastelum to such a substantial margin. I think he's probably, like I said, a little bit closer to his athletic prime. He might have a little bit better durability than a guy like D-Rod, but this just for me is a fight where it's got to be dog or pass. I don't love this fight for either guy. It's kind of a weird booking overall, but somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. I think it's a loser leave town match potentially. Certainly for the D-Rod side, I don't know that he'll be re-signed on a loss here. So shout out to if you underestimate D-Rod, you will lose to him on points. Lee got him to the ground plenty, still lost on the numbers. Yeah, and I think that if this turns into a 15-minute fight, the guy you probably trust to throw more volume over the course of 15 minutes is Daniel Rodriguez, and also the guy who's probably a little more likely to attempt submission. So for those reasons, guys, it's a dog or pass for me. I don't know that I'll get there, but I kind of just feel like, Kelvin Gastelum needs to prove something before he's a minus 250 favorite in the UFC. And the Chris Curtis win was controversial, right? It's not like he's had a clean win in a long time. The Darren Till fight that he had as well, when you look back at that was pretty close. He just leaves a lot of fights within the margin, right? That was a split decision. He beat Ian Heinisch by unanimous decision. Guys, there were competitive moments against Ian Heinisch. So, yeah, it's just there's nothing jumping off the screen is a real positive for me for Kelvin. Let's go to the odds screen here from Fight Numbers. Shout out to our friends at Fight Numbers. Promo code Liam. If you're looking for the hookup, all the information you need in the description box down below. They got minus 233 Kelvin Gastelum over on Betfair and a plus 220 on Daniel Rodriguez, the comeback at Bet Online. You're looking at the over-under sitting at 2.5 rounds here for this welterweight contest. And you've got a minus 225 to the over at Circa Sportsbook. You got a plus 210 to the under, and that's coming from Pinnacle. So shout out to Pepe, says UFC doing D-Rod a favor for fighting Ian Gary. That makes a lot of sense to me, brother. I could definitely see that. And I know he had a relationship with Monster Energy. He's kind of done a lot of the right things promotionally. And he's a weed smoking fun guy. So I don't know how well that translates over in Saudi, but we'll have to live to find out. Next up, my man, we got Shara Magomedov taking on Joilton Luterbach, and this is one that calls for a swig of the old coffee. Now, I'm going to interrupt this program to bring you guys a brief, thought about this card. And the brief thought is this. I think if you blind bet underdogs this weekend, you might come out profitable, which is not normally the case for these foreign cards, especially when you're talking about Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi. When they go and they have these heavy chalky parlay type cards, those don't tend to be cards I do well on. But just looking at these matchups and a lot of the uncertainty and a lot of the weirdness that's inherent within them, I do think there's a lot of live underdogs on this card. So I could be right, I could be wrong, but I wanted to put that brief interlude in because people are going to say, Liam, you basically said it's dog or pass on a bunch of these fights off the top. That's how I feel, truthfully. And again, I'm going to feel the exact same way talking about this next fight, which is Shara Magomedov taking on Joilton Luterbach. And Shara Magomedov has a lot that people like, right? He's fun. He's got an interesting backstory, right? He's got the one eye. He's got a cool look. And he's also got a fun fighting style. He has a bunch of kicks. He's flashy, dynamic. He'll throw kicks from very close range. He can be very fast with them. He'll throw them to the legs. He'll throw them to the body. He'll throw them to the head. There's a lot of things that you see that are fun and interesting about Shara Magomedov. Even off his back, he's looking to like post a hand on the ground and kick you in the head, kind of like Anthony Pettis-esque in his game and his approach. When you look at Joilton Luterbach is a guy that has a ton of fighting experience. I spent a lot of my morning watching this guy, in all sorts of different disciplines. A lot of people take away from you if you're not doing MMA full time. But for some of these guys, in order to get better at mixed martial arts, they need to fix one particular part of their game. They need to work on some aspect of their game that hasn't been fully developed. And when you look at a guy like Luderbach, I think that he had pretty decent fundamental MMA skills, but I think he had a few problems, right? Namely this, right? You start with a guy like Jonathan Luderbach, and he's all over the place in terms of his weight since he's been competing. 155, 165, 170, 175, 185. My man has been every weight class, between basically like featherweight and cruiserweight, right? Like the guy is just all over the board. And what is fascinating to me is that in all these fights, he's competitive, right? So what ends up happening is when you cut to 155 pounds, you give up a lot, right? You're giving up a lot of strength. You're giving up a lot of muscle. You're giving up a lot of power. And you also give up a little bit in endurance, right? It's important to keep in mind, this is a guy who basically just fights all the time. So when you look at a lot of guys, they have these beautiful records, right? But their career is very cultivated. And what I mean by that is they take, one fight against one bum, in a very prepared manner, and they win that fight, and then they take some time and they get with their team and they find another bum, another another jobber, another B-side, some enhancement talent, and they bring that guy in. And again, this is no disrespect. This is the fight game. This is the business. This is taking a prospect from the ground up and trying to make them something and get people's interest in them. A lot of times, guys, they're not fighting anybody serious along the way. They're just trying to get experience. They're just trying to build a highlight reel. They're trying to get a little bit of familiarity with the walkout, with going out there, having live competition, a resisting opponent, these kind of things. And when you're looking at Jonathan Luderbach, for me, he just feels like a guy who at this point in his career will not be phased, right? He's gone out there and fought 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, like anything that it takes, like just go out there. I'll do a kickboxing match this week. I'll do an MMA fight 2 weeks from now. I'll go do a jiu-jitsu tournament over here. Is that always the best way to market yourself? No, because guys, the one thing you learn is if you compete long enough, you'll lose. You'll make a mistake. You'll do something wrong, right? That happens. You take a lot of risks. You take a lot of chances. You say yes to every opportunity. Not everything's going to work out, but it's also going to give you a lot of experience. And so what you have is a guy in Jonathan Luderbach who gets to the UFC with almost 50 fights under his belt. He's done it in a variety of rule sets. He's fought guys that are big. He's fought guys that are small. He's fought guys that are quick. He's fought guys that are long. He's fought guys that are short. He's fought, like, what has he not seen so far in his MMA and combat sports career? It's kind of hard to say. And so he's gone out there against Dutch kickboxers. He's gone out there against power strikers. He's gone out there against guys that want a point style with him. And then he's also gone out there against guys that want to wrestle and grapple. I think that people should go out and watch his fight with Dricus du Plessis, because what you see is he's gone all up and down in weight, right? And when he fought du Plessis, he looked like a smaller guy than du Plessis, but not by a crazy amount. He just didn't look like he was as muscular and as crazy brolic. He was still getting takedowns. He was still getting, good positions. He just wasn't able to follow through on all those, right? And when you saw his ass was in the jackpot, right? Everything got reversed. He's the one underneath. Dricus du Plessis is a real middleweight. And by the way, he's the fucking UFC champion, right? So it's like, yeah, that guy is going to be tough to beat, tough to get one over on. But he showed a lot of promise and potential. And you look at all these fights that he's had, guys. I came away from his glory fights thinking this guy takes a lot of risk. He's got a pretty good durability. He's had all these fights, right? Somebody brought up the fact, Olajuwon, shout out to our guy. I appreciate you for being here. Olajuwon Dream says, Luderbach was just KO'd by a 5-3 guy back in December. Here's what I want to point out. He could definitely get KO'd here, guys. If you watch him fight, he takes tremendous risks. But he also can get takedowns. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Bruno Silva, guys, took him down sometimes with good techniques, other times with good timing, other times with complete bullshit. That's just the truth. Like, literally, this guy would get hit with a big shot and be like, yo, fuck this, get on the ground. And Bruno Silva would get a takedown, okay? Bruno Silva is not super sophisticated with his takedown attempts. Jonathan Luderbach has shown a different amount of takedowns, right? He could take people down along the fence line. That was something that wasn't there earlier in his career. I watched it develop over time, an ability to take people down along the fence. In open space, I've also seen an ability for him to get takedowns at times. He's got power, right? He's got an ability to crack people, land hard shots, meaningful shots. If I had to criticize him, sometimes he's a little bit too nice, right? Sometimes my man's looking at the referee like, stop the fight because the guy's on wobbly legs. Listen, that would probably be me if I was out there too. I don't want to see people get hurt like that. Like, I'm not trying to see people get hospitalized and all this stuff. That's just not me. I'm a fight fan. I understand the nature and implications of violence. Sometimes that's just the way it goes in a fight. But what I mean is, like, I don't need the gratuitous violence. I don't need extra 5 shots after somebody's unconscious, something like that. None of that's for me. And Luderbach is very much on the side of, hey, like, this guy's hurt. This guy's rock bad. Like, stop the fight. And I wish that his finishing instincts were a little bit more pointed. And I don't mean go out there and just keep, turning this guy's brain into mush. I'm saying lock a choke in, right? You want to be a humanitarian? No problem. Put the choke in, my brother, and let's be done with it. And I think that when you're looking at a guy like Joelton Luterbach, he's got a name that doesn't sound like a fighter, but he is Brazilian. His wife is German. He's trained in Germany now for a time. But guys, as recently as the pandemic, right, he's back in Brazil doing his camps. So the guy's got experience all over the world. He's fought a million times, in all these different rule sets and promotions. I don't think he's afraid of anybody. And he didn't sound cocky when I listened to his interview. He said, listen, I can take this guy down. I know I can take this guy down. But what I can't do is I can't think this is going to be easy. I can't think this is going to be a walkover. I can't think I have it all figured out. I have to go out there and earn this win. It's a lot of people are telling me it's going to be easy. He said it's going to be difficult, but I can take him to the ground. I know I can do that. And when I do, I'm going to submit him. That's a good game plan. That's a good idea to have. Bruno Silva, guys, didn't realize he should have wrestled until 7.5 minutes into the fight. And by that point, he had already taken a metric ton of ass whooping. The one thing I want to give Shara Magomedov credit for is off of his back, guys. He throws like elbows. He throws short punches. He controls posture. He's not easy to just dominate once you're on the ground, but he still makes mistakes. He does things that I do and like kick myself over in the training room, like throwing up a shitty triangle that gets you leg dragged. He does that in the middle of the octagon against Bruno Silva, who's not that good a grappler. I'm telling you guys, Joelton Luderbach can make him look bad in some of these grappling exchanges if it gets there. So for me, competitive fight on the feet, I think on the feet, you have to favor a guy like Shara. He's too fast. He's too technical. He places his shots better. And a guy like Joelton Luderbach, he does have bad defense. That is like his calling card of like the one thing that you don't love about him. But he does have a pretty good chin. From everything I've seen, he is a durable guy. Sometimes you get hit by a 5-3 fighter and go down. But when you've had 50 fights, I'll give you a fucking break on that, truthfully. And I've seen him get drilled, like huge shot from a kickboxer right to the dome. Guy keeps walking forward. And in round 3, he's got that guy backing up. He's got that guy doing the stanky leg. So I'm just saying, this guy, Joelton Luderbach, does not strike me at all as a punk. I think he's here to fight. I think he's here to stay in the UFC. And I think he's going to be a fun fighter. So yeah, it should be a scrap. Should be an absolute scrap. And the winner of this fight will be positioned for a big fight coming up next. Both these guys are on the right side of 31.5, right? Both young enough guys to make a run. But the difference between them, I would say, is just one guy has way more competition experience. So should be a good scrap, though. Next up, guys, a fight that I have very little to say rounds out the main card. It's Volkan Oezdemir taking on Johnny Walker. You've got no time, Volkan Oezdemir taking on Johnny Walker here, guys. And Johnny Walker represents Ireland and Brazil. So, I got to love my guy, Johnny Walker, right? Married an Irish woman. Shout out to him. Nothing but love for that. He's also the funniest guy maybe in the UFC. Where are you, Johnny? I'm in the desert. Fight stopped. The guy is like, he posted a video after the Jamal Hill fight. He goes, I go to sleep in the fight, so it did not work out. Like, it was like, this guy is always making me crack up laughing. But that being said, how can you bet on Johnny Walker at chalk prices? It's always tough, right? He's got everything on paper that you want about a fighter. He's bigger, he's taller, he's longer, he looks the part, he's got some jiu-jitsu, he can knock you out. But the durability doesn't quite check out, especially in this light heavyweight division where one mistake, fight could be over shortly thereafter. And when you're looking at the Did I miss a fight? People are saying the Lima. Yeah, guys, I'm looking at Tapology right now, and the Lima fight is on the prelim. So I'm just going fight by fight on Tapology order. But in any case, what we've got next is oh no. Wait, are you serious? Oh my god, I just spent time fucking talking about this fight and they just canceled it, eh? Hold on. Now I gotta check Twitter. So bear with me here, guys. You guys are seeing some real-time reporting. Let's see if I can confirm this anywhere. Huh. I don't know about that. Oh, Jonathan Luderbach is out. Shara Magomedov will now take on Antonio Trocoli. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? This is being reported by MMA Orbit. Excuse my language. 5 hours ago, Marcel Dorf was reporting that this was moved to the main card. Now I'm seeing just MMA Orbit. I haven't seen this confirmed anywhere else yet. Let me see if I can confirm it. What the hell, man? Karate Combat 1 hour ago tweeted about Jonathan Luderbach making his UFC debut this weekend. I'm a little bit confused here, guys. So with that being said, fuck it. Back to this fight we were talking about. That fucking sucks. Yeah, Shara's going to kill this fucking Trocoli character, I would imagine. Although if Trocoli can grapple, I guess he has a chance, but fucking A. That's really annoying. Welcome to the live entertainment business, guys. I just wasted 15 minutes of my life for you. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Hopefully they rebook that fight one day. So John says, tell me Walker isn't stupid, Liam. I can't do that. Walker is a little bit low on the fight IQ. That's a polite way to say it, I believe. And when you're looking at this fight, I mean, listen, like I said, he's bigger than Volkan. He's younger than Volkan. He's taller than Volkan. He's longer than Volkan. He checks a lot of those boxes. He's also got a big social media following. He's a star in that way, one of the biggest stars on the card in terms of social media following. But you look at a guy like Johnny Walker, you know, he just tends to find himself on the wrong end of huge highlight reel knockouts. 16-5 career to the knockout. Got knocked out by Ankalaev. Got hurt badly by Ankalaev and looked like he was on the verge of getting knocked out. That fight went to a no contest. That's the one with the infamous "we're in the desert." He beat Anthony Smith, Paul Craig, who's now a middleweight, and Iwan Kutalaba. And that Iwan Kutalaba fight, you know, kind of a free win. Kutalaba just goes out there and made a fool of himself a little bit. 0-4 career to the sub in the UFC is Iwan Kutalaba, 6-9 in the promotion. So you're seeing a lot of guys with these negative records, you know, that he was able to get over on, right? And I think that when you're looking at the loss to Jamal Hill, a brutal, you know, pretty devastating knockout loss. Then you look at the Thiago Santos loss, unanimous decision. And guys, that was a fight that he should have won. You know, it was well within his reach. Thiago Santos looked washed and he just didn't go for it, right? He kind of just let that fight pass him by, didn't take any risks. And then when he did take risks, the next fight against Jamal Hill, he got knocked out in the first round. So he's always been stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he actually goes out there and tries to give himself the best chance to win, you know, he gets in a really tough spot. And when he goes out there and tries to be more hesitant, he just lets the fight pass him by, and it's like a close split decision at best type territory. You know, beating Ryan Spann, guys, if you remember, he actually got knocked out by Ryan Spann like multiple times in that fight, and Ryan Spann just like shot a takedown while he was half out on his feet, and then he elbowed him into oblivion. Unbelievable. I mean, just like, that was Ryan Spann losing. That was not Johnny winning. So he could have been on a 5-fight losing skid in the UFC. And then he went on a 3-fight run. Hats off to him. You know, losing to Ankalaev doesn't tell me that he's a bum or a flake or whatever, but he's 7-5 in the promotion. He's barely hanging above 500. That one no contest would have made it 7-6 in the promotion if you want to go that way. Then you look at Volkan no time Oezdemir. He beat Bogdan Guskov. That's a good win, you know, quality win, but not a guy who's very proven in the UFC. He lost to Nikita Krylov, who I believe also beat Johnny Walker. So common opponent, no skin off your nose there. Then you look at Paul Craig. He got the win over him. That's a common opponent between these two. And Volkan Oezdemir beat the piss out of Paul Craig. That was not a very close fight at all. He lost the decision to Magomed Ankalaev. It was much more competitive than either of the fights that Johnny Walker had with Ankalaev. Then you look at the Yuri Prohaska fight, and he was landing some decent shots on Yuri, but he just could not deal with the pressure, the power, the invincible Yuri Prohaska just coming forward and leaning into him the whole fight. He beat Alexander Rakic, another guy who's considered a top guy. Close split decision, controversial, yes, he got it done. Ilir Latifi, he put him down in a heap, guys. That was a vicious, vicious knockout from Volkan Oezdemir. He lost a split decision to Dominic Reyes. That was another controversial one. People thought he won that fight. So if you just go back a ways, since 2018 when he lost via rear naked choke to Anthony Smith, we've seen a pretty good run out of Volkan Oezdemir. His losses are split decision to Dom Reyes, overhand right to Yuri Prohaska, Magomed Ankalaev via decision, and Kralov via decision. Those are all very quality fighters. So I think both these guys have good losses on their resume for the most part. I think Volkan probably has the better wins between these two guys, the more meaningful wins. But I think that we also have to consider, at his age, at 34, two losses, via KO, TKO. He's been submitted as well in the UFC on a number of occasions, right? Got submitted by Daniel Cormier, got submitted as well by Anthony Smith. So Johnny Walker, I think his best chance to win this fight would be to out-grapple Volkan Oezdemir. I don't know that he's much better at grappling than Volkan. I would assume he's probably not any better than him, but he is long. He does have those good limbs for, hunting submissions, and he could potentially hurt Volkan at any point in this fight. And if he does, that would give him an opportunity to potentially latch on a submission. I do think that on the other side of things, Oezdemir, live to win this fight by knockout, live to win it by decision. I would be a little bit surprised if he subbed Johnny Walker, but I wouldn't be floored by it. Has Johnny Walker ever been submitted in pro MMA? I think he has. Yeah, he has been one time. And it was all the way back against Klidson Abreu back in 2015. But I feel like he got hurt in that fight as well. So I guess the club and sub is there potentially. But yeah, Dixon says that this reeks of split decision. Doesn't surprise me. Pepe says, surprised he didn't see O's at minus 160 here. I get where you're coming from. I also just think it's a case of where they know they're going to write money on a public guy with 2 million followers. And also he's the big guy, just a big guy in this fight. So I get what you mean on skills, but I think on intangibles, that's what they're looking at for this line here, Pepe. Marcel just made it official. Shout out to our guy Spaffron, says hit the like and support this hardworking man and all the free content. Motherfucks. Yeah, I really would appreciate the support, guys. It's simple things like dropping a like on the video, commenting your thoughts, your predictions, your favorite bets, anything like that in the comments. I do go back and answer the comments. Sometimes it's not the day of the stream, but I try and get back to it before the end of fight week and say, hey, thank you for the support, or hey, here's the answer to the question you asked. So if you guys have questions, comments, concern, fire those off in the comment section. I appreciate it. Also, get subscribed to the channel. We're doing this each and every week. We're dropping knowledge. We're dropping, hitters. And listen, I'm not going to win every week. I'm not going to have great reads and great takes every event. But what I am going to do is the same amount of research, the same amount of effort and intensity each and every week, trying to get the best results possible for you guys, for myself, for the community. And so I'm going to try and just steer people in the right direction. We're not going to bloviate. We're not going to say we never get it wrong. We always get it right. We're always perfect. None of that's true. And people that sell you on that are lying, right? So what we're just going to do is tell you how we've been doing. And year to date, we have bet, about 125 units, 126 units on mixed martial arts. We've won 29 units of profit, 23% ROI year to date, and no funny money, right? Every ticket I place, I have them. I can show them. I post them out on some of the tickets that we had from over the weekend. That's what we do. We're trying to win money. We're trying to be responsible. We're not trying to advocate go lay 100 million units on every play. Slow, steady wins the race by the end of the year, targeting plus money, being aggressive with our targeting of value, not just betting to bet, trying to bet with an edge, and that's it. So I appreciate you guys for the support. I appreciate everybody who rocks with the show. Thank you guys, for tuning in. And without further ado, we're going to go a little bit more rapid fire on the rest of the preliminaries. And for those of you guys who are saying, Liam, we can't go rapid fire, don't worry. We're going to have plenty to say tomorrow on Bets and Banter. We're coming back to you then. I might even have a Friday stream. It might be on a little vacation, out by the beach, and get a little bit of something going there as well. So stay tuned. If you guys want more content this week, go ahead and drop your suggestions for post weigh-in stream or whatever you guys would like to see later in the week on Friday down in the comments below. But with that being said, guys, we're on to the prelims. No more futzing about. We got Nasrat Haqparast taking on Jared Gordon. Dogger pass situation for me. Listen to what I say here. I think Nasrat Haqparast has a chance to win this fight by knockout. He's looked like he's coming into his own a little bit lately. He's got power on the feet. He can go out there and box. That's his skill. That's his attribute. That's what he likes to do. And when he's at his best in the UFC, he's going out there and boxing. However, we also got to think of the fact that Jared Gordon is a quite good boxer. When fights go the distance, when they go to the cards, this guy, Jared Gordon, has a way of winning the fight. Only time he dropped it was a very controversial one to Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. I don't think that we're talking about the same kind of pull with a guy like Nasrat Haqparast. Now, I think it's 11-1 or 10-1 off the top of my head, Pepe, and I'm literally just firing from memory here. But when you're looking at this guy, Jared Gordon, he's very proven in decisions. Here's the other thing. He's a much better grappler on paper than Nasrat Haqparast by far. So he's not as physical as some guys that have out-grappled him in the past. Think Dan Hooker, big guy, like huge for the lightweight division, big muscles as well, right? He was able to muscle him to the ground and just horse him around, throw him down. I think that it might be a little more physically taxing for Jared Gordon to out-wrestle this guy, but I also believe, guys, that he can out-grapple him if it gets to the ground. Nasrat Haqparast has never shown that ability on the ground. As far as a guy like Jared Gordon is a brown belt in the Renzo Gracie system, obviously you guys know New York bias is here. Renzo Gracie bias is here disclosed. But I truly believe that the grappling is a different level for Jared Gordon. Shout out to our guy, Drew, in the comments. Says, Liam killed it on Patreon this past weekend. I appreciate you, Drew. His reads are never far off. Join the group and let's cash some bets. That's always the goal. We did very well on our track bets, plus 13 units over the weekend. We did way better in the Patreon, just discussing in between each fight, hey, guys, this is what we're thinking. And we always keep ourselves accountable. So, I appreciate the support, Drew. That means a lot. Shout out to Moneyline Mills, says, let's cash. You know that. It's always back to work for us. So, yeah, if I was to make this line, guys, shout out to our guy Elijah here in the chat, says, lean Nasrat, but too wide on the line. I would make Nasrat a minus 130, minus 150 favorite here. He should be favored, but I can't trust a guy like Nasrat. I don't think he's got wrestling and grappling upside here at all, period. I think if the fight goes to the cards, it's a very close fight. I think he's more likely to win by knockout, but here's the other thing. Jared Gordon can box. He can diddy bop a little bit. He doesn't have much power in his hands. That's why they made the Paddy Pimblett fight, but he can box and land a couple shots, cut you up a little bit. And Nasrat, he doesn't have a bad chin, but he's definitely been buzzed a little bit before. So I would favor him in a fight that ends by knockout. No doubt about that. But I wouldn't rule out Jared Gordon, especially if he gets to a good position, especially if he gets him tired, that he could get some successful positions. The things that are going against Jared, the intangibles, he's a little bit older, but I think that he is a live underdog in the spot, more experienced guy, fought the better guys in the UFC. So a couple good things going Jared's way. Also, he rides with a lot of guys in that crew. Bilal Muhammad, a lot of people that support him. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a nice reception as well from the crowd, like Nasrat I expect to get. Next up, guys, we've got Muhammad Naimov against Felipe Lima. I will be very brief on this fight. The reason being is Felipe Lima, I don't know him, okay? I will just always level with you guys. I'll tell you guys the truth. A lot of people will tell you, oh, yeah, I remember I don't know this guy. I got to look into him. I'll come back to you guys tomorrow with an educated opinion. That's what I can promise. What I can tell you guys is Muhammad Naimov has been a printer for me, right? A guy that I've picked outright as a dog a few times. I bet him as a dog a few times. He was a dog. Now he's back to these favorite distinctions. And it's like, whoa, let's cool our jets just a tiny bit. Because last time out, he fought a guy that wasn't even a fight, right? The guy stepped in the cage or something, hurt himself. Nothing even happened. So I don't rate that one at all. You throw that out from the sample size. He beat Nathaniel Wood. Guys, he cheated his ass off. I love that he did. I always say cheating is incentivized in mixed martial arts. If you want an example, go watch that fight. I cashed my bet on Muhammad Naimov at plus 2XX, whatever it was. And then you see people were bitching and complaining. He cheated. Yeah, he did cheat. But I knew he was going to cheat. I knew he was a cheater, and that's fine. right? Nathaniel Wood is undersized at 145, and you see a guy like Nemeth, who I know is going to cheat for my money, who he's going to try to win, and he's got a literal football stadium of people in Tajikistan rooting for him. They'd like to see this guy do well. Short notice fights create a new variable. So what does Felipe Lima bring to the table? I'm not sure. But the fact that odds makers and the public respect him so much, that's saying something to me. I got to look into this guy. He's obviously going to be a pretty talented guy if the numbers are so close. As for Naimov, it was not that long ago that this guy was losing fights to Colin Anglin, of all people. If y'all know that name, if y'all are deep in this game like I am, and you know Colin Anglin, you know that's not a loss you want to have on your resume. So I think Naimov has gotten way better. He trains with the right guys. He works very hard. He's got knockout power. Maybe he finishes this guy and puts him down. But for me, I have to look into Lima before I have a strong opinion. And I could just say from a long-term standpoint, I like the idea of Naimov at plus money. I do not like the idea of Naimov at chalk based on what I know about him so far. So thank you guys for the support, but that is not a fight that we will spend very much time on. Next up, guys, we've got two guys on opposite ends of the spectrum for me, okay? When I have tried to fade Nicholas Dalby, I have lost money hand over fist. When I have bet on Nicholas Dalby as an underdog, things have gone well for me. When I have bet on Rinat Fakhretdinov, I had success, right? I bet on him. I believe it was against Andreas Michailidis as a big chalk favorite. You guys know me. I don't bet chalk favorites very often. He absolutely dominated in that fight. Vindicated there. Then you look at his other fights. I mean, the win over Brian Battle is super impressive to me. I think that Brian Battle is a stud. I think that Brian Battle is a very good fighter. And so to go out there and dominate him in the fashion that he did, I was impressed there. I bet Kevin Lee against Rinat Fakhretdinov, guys, and that was a terrible bet, right? Not only did Kevin Lee not have the physicality and the durability, he just, he got injured, I think, before the fight even started, right? So it's like he just was not in a position prepared physically to get in there and compete at that level. So it was a uphill battle from the start. What's frustrating, though, is, guys, last time out, plus 340, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. That should have cashed. I'm not a guy that gets on and bitches and complains very often, but I really believed that he had finished that fight in round 3. I thought he dropped him. I thought he hurt him. I thought he had done everything he needed to do in that fight. Instead, referee doesn't stop it. He gasses out going for the finish, and we had to settle for the draw, get our money back there at plus 340. A plus EV, nothing comes from it. But in any case, guys, what I will say is this. Trends say one thing for me. I either have to bet on Nicholas Dalby or pass on the fight. I don't think Rinat Fakhretdinov has been covering these prices very frequently. Nicholas Dalby is not a guy that's super easy to dominate inside the cage. Guys that have beaten him, they've normally struggled to physically over the course of a difficult fight. Bloody back and forth wars. So I do think this is an important note. Dalby got out-grappled by Tim Means. He absolutely could get out-grappled here as well. But Gabriel Bonfim, touted for his grappling, was unable to do so. Muslim Salikhov's obviously more of a striker. Warley Alves more of a striker. Claudio Silva is basically a pure grappler, and he does not have great cardio. But I bet Claudio Silva to beat Nicholas Dalby, right? So I have tried to fade Nicholas Dalby a few times, and he was a favorite there. But what ended up happening is he was able to outlast him. You see that Nicholas Dalby, he was finally able to finish somebody. But we've definitely seen that Dalby is a guy, he's a guy that's just gone out there and competed above his price tag so frequently, right? 5-1 as a UFC underdog. And if you look at his most recent run, he lost to Tim Means as a dog, but he beat Daniel Rodriguez as a dog. I had bet Daniel Rodriguez, thought Daniel Rodriguez won the fight, but it was very close. Couldn't take anything away from him. Then he beats Claudio Silva, who was minus 204 favorite in that fight. He beat Warley Alves as a plus 120 dog. He beat Muslim Salikhov as a plus 165 dog. And he beat Gabriel Bonfim as a plus 460 dog. Now he's back in the role as an underdog. He's plus 285, taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov. And I just think that we have to, take into account the fact that Rinat Fakhretdinov, he's 32 years of age, right? He's no spring chicken. He's 3-0-1 in the UFC, but that one could have easily been a loss. Then you look at the fight with Kevin Lee. That was a very fortuitous, collapse by Kevin Lee in that fight, right? Kevin just had nothing to offer him. And then you look at Brian Battle. That was a dominant, great win. And I think that Brian learned a lot from that fight. I think he's gotten a lot better from that fight. But I just think he was completely taken aback, right? He got blasted with a big right hand early in the fight, and he just got wrecked in terms of the wrestling. When somebody's just higher level at wrestling than you, sometimes there's nothing you can do, especially when it starts off so poorly. Brian was swollen up. He was cut. He's in a bad way. And it was impressive that he was able to keep that going. But I just haven't been blown away overall by the resume of Rinat Fakhretdinov. So for me, he is a good fighter, but I do think he's a guy that could go out there and fumble the bag. We saw it last time. I didn't think Easy Dose looked particularly sharp against Randy Brown. I didn't think he looked particularly sharp for most of the fight against Rinat, but when he was able to get off and land, he was able to hurt him really bad and almost finish the fight. So that's the way I see it, guys. Close fight and probably a dog or pass situation for me. I do think the way to play Rinat, maybe you get creative. You look for that submission angle. Obviously, we've seen the Jesse Ronson scrape from the record, right? But Jesse Ronson was also on an insane amount of gear. You guys could go back and watch that fight yourself. Like, he looked like a science experiment. Next up, guys, we've got Muin Gafurov taking on Kyung-Ho Kang. And fading Muin Gafurov, I think, is typically a good idea. I don't believe in this guy at all. I think in terms of the Tajikistan brothers, Muhammad Naimov has a lot more potential in my view than Muin Gafurov, in small part because he's in a much better weight class for himself. But also you look at Muin Gafurov and loses to Castaneda, no skin off your nose, gets submitted by Said Nurmagomedov. Maybe not a great look, but not terrible. He lost to my boy Chad and Hellinger, guys, and I bet Chad and Hellinger, one of my favorite bets of all time. Chad and Hellinger, I bet it at plus 275. It kept going the other way. I bet plus 285. Kept going the other way. I bet plus 320. Kept going the other way. I bet plus 340. Sometimes you got to just stand in front of the market and say, fuck you. I don't believe in what you guys believe in on this one. And on Contender Series is a good time to do that. I knew that Chad and Hellinger had a bad record and a good skill set. And I knew that he was a dog and really wanted to make the UFC. And Muin Gafurov, the one thing I had seen from him that I knew was going to give me pause was I had seen him just slow down and let fights pass him by, right? In one championship, he lost to Reese McLaren. He lost to Kevin Bellignon. He lost to John Lineker. And in almost all those instances, he competes all right in round one and just lets the fight slowly start to slip away from him. His cardio is not great. His willingness to push down the stretch, not great, not what I wanted to see. So, he's a fine fighter, but I just don't believe in him, right? And until he proves something to me at this level, I kind of just think he's a hanger-on. I don't think he's a real guy yet at this level. Now, his opponent, Kyung-Ho Kang, has a very weird resume. He also lost to John Castaneda, a common opponent between the two. But prior to that, he submitted Christian Quinones in the first round. He beat Danal Batgari. He lost to jiu-jitsu specialist Hani Yaya. And then he beat Pingwian Liu, Brandon Davis, and Teruto Ishihara. So he wasn't beating the best names, right? He's kind of been, in the lower end of the division. It's not a fight I feel great about, but in terms of getting the more UFC experienced guy who's proven a little bit more, who's the bigger guy in Kyung-Ho Kang, he seems like the guy who I would probably lean towards. But at 36 years of age in the bantamweight division, he could get cracked on the chin. He could get knocked out. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, I did see this where Craig Jones put Rinat to sleep twice in a karate combat match. I did see that. Listen, it's as simple for me as 8-4 record in the UFC. It's kind of hard to fade that with Muin Gafurov, who's 0-2 in the UFC, 0-1 on Contender Series, and never really done anything at this level. Most of the time when he fought quality opposition, whether it was in one, it was in Contender Series, it was in the UFC, he's fallen short, and sometimes he's even gotten finished, like that most recent fight with Said Nurmagomedov. So I'm not really sold on this guy. I'd need to see more from him, but it's such a closely lined fight. I'm probably just going to let that one pass me by. All right, guys. Next up, we've got Magomed Gadzi-Yasulov taking on Brenson Hiberio. And I've done very well so far picking Brenson Hiberio fights, where I picked him to beat Bruno Lopes on the Contender Series. He was a massive underdog in that spot. And I thought Lopes was just getting too overhyped. I thought that in a light heavyweight division with a killer be killed fighter like Brenson Hiberio, it was going to be hard to cover those prices against him, even if you were better. And we kind of saw that, right? Where he just went out there, he got reckless with Bruno Lopez. He started swinging with him. He put him under pressure. He made it a crazy fight. and he finished it, and when you look at that fight, I mean, people were stunned at the time, guys. The Contender Series, watching Contingency, they couldn't believe it. Bruno Lopes was a very hyped guy at that time. And Magomed Gaziasulov came onto the Contender Series, and you guys could check this out yourself. I've been doing these breakdowns for a long time, and I did the Contender Series breakdown with a couple of my guys, Gordon Gambles, Gordo Gambles, at Gordo Gambles. Go check him out on X. Go check him out, Plays and Fades YouTube channel. He's my brother from another. Met him in person. Great individual. Very smart guy. Good DFS player as well. With that introduction aside, him and Pierce, a guy who's a little bit more low key, a little bit more keeps to himself. I don't even know what his Twitter ad is off the top of my head. I think it's Big Bird UFC, something like that. But he's very sharp, right? And so they were both on the show with me, and we thought, like, this guy, Magomed Gaziasulov, like, maybe we don't know exactly what to make of this guy. We had nice enough things to say. We had some compliments, right? But we also were like, this guy he's fighting, like, why is he here? And it wasn't to try and be disrespectful, but like Jose Medina hadn't beaten anybody quality. He hadn't beaten anybody that was known. He was kind of just, bouncing around fighting guys he never heard of, no Wikipedia pages and stuff like this. And when you look at how that fight played out, right, he was landing a lot on Medina in the early going. And in round one, the commentators were talking about, like, this is kind of uncomfortable. Like, maybe they should step in and stop this fight. And it never happened, right? Medina's standing there taking the shots, and Medina starts pointing to him. He starts, saying, like, come on, give me more. Like, pointing to the ground like he's Max Holloway or something. And, guys, this Bolivian fighter, Jose Medina, that nobody had ever heard of, starts landing, especially in round three. He starts getting off on a couple shots. Gaziasulov, who's supposed to be way higher level, he's the biggest favorite on the card. He looked to me like he was ready to go into cardiac arrest. Like he was just huffing, puffing. His takedowns looked labored. He did not look very effective at all from the top position. He was able to get some takedowns. They were sloppy. They were unimpressive, I felt. So I altogether came away really unimpressed. Right, he got signed to the UFC. He got the contract. Both guys did, right? Medina did as well because of all the damage he was willing to absorb. They were like, bro, you'd be perfect. You go out there and take an ass whooping. We love you. And they signed him on. But I'm telling you guys, when I look at Gaziasulov, I saw a lot to be skeptical of. Does he have good striking? Sure. He's a dangerous guy on the feet. Fast, powerful. But can he keep it up for 15 minutes? I have my doubts. Has he fought good fighters? Guys, the record says no. If you just go back and look through, whether you want to look at the record at the time that he fought him, the record retrospectively, how they've done since, this guy's never fought anybody good, really, in mixed martial arts. And the best guy he's ever beaten is Jose Medina, and I thought he was in cardiac arrest in the third round. So as for Brenson Imperio, he's a kill or be killed guy. What does that mean? That means sometimes, like his last fight, he's going to get killed, and it's going to be fast, right? His last fight out, Ming Yang Zhang, I picked Ming Yang Zhang. I thought Ming Yang Zhang had better hardware, that he's a little bit more dangerous. Very closely lined fight, right? You see Brenson Imperio go from being a big underdog on Contender Series to being very closely lined with a guy like Ming Yang Zhang. And Ming Yang Zhang, on the other hand, was a big underdog on Road to UFC, then knocked the guy out brutally, and then he became a minus 125 favorite. So people didn't know how to approach that market. And Ming Yang Zhang just cleaned him up in the first round. And I think that now people are like, Brenson Imperio sucks. Brenson Imperio, what is that guy? He's nothing. But the truth is, I think if you put Ming Yang Zhang in there with Gaziasulov, it's not unlikely that Gaziasulov gets flattened in the first round. Because Ming Yang Zhang, I think, is on crazy drugs. The guy gets hit with clean shots to the chin and just no sells them, keeps coming forward. So, yeah, for me, I think of this as a competitive fight. I just think of it as a fight where, listen, Gaziasulov should be favored, but again, should he be minus 300, 400, something like that? I don't see that. Like, what, based on what? Because he beat the Bolivian kickboxer, 2 rounds to 1, or it's like because Brenson Imperio is tiny. No, he's the same side. Is he a way older guy? No, he's a younger guy. Is he some unknown, fighting a big star? No, neither one of these guys have a big following. It's just like, it's just a competitive light heavyweight fight to me on paper, and everybody seems to be, liking the Gaziasulov side. And for me, not enough to like on that side. Feels to me like he's Gaziasulov until proven otherwise. But next up, guys, we will talk about Long Shao taking on Chang Ho Lee, and I hope I'm doing these guys justice. I don't want to speak out of turn here, guys, but I believe, and I'm going to be very proud of myself if I did this. This is an old school poll. No, I didn't. Oh, that's disgusting. Okay. So I thought that I had ended up playing Long Shao when these guys fought back in the day. Now I have to look up on Twitter and see if I've ever tweeted about this guy before, because you never know. But in any case, right? I have a memory of this guy being a huge underdog and winning on the Contender Series, right? So he was on, or excuse me, he's on Contender Series. Am I thinking of the right guy? So Xiao Long fought Christian Quinones. You guys are seeing me literally struggle with this one in real time, so I appreciate the support. He lost to Christian Quinones via decision. Okay. Did he come back to Contender Series? No, he came back to the road to UFC. Who am I thinking of? There was somebody that won on the Contender Series. So it was a massive underdog. And I thought that they were Chinese, but I could be mistaken. In any case, guys, what's important to know is this, right? Long Shao has way more professional experience coming into this fight. His opponent here, Chang Ho Lee, is, also from the road to UFC, right? So both these guys come through the same program. However, he just hasn't had as many professional bouts. He has had some amateur experience as well, done some fighting in Brave, which is a pretty respected organization, but did lose his fight over in Brave as well. So for me, I have to do tape on this one, guys. I do not have a strong opinion here coming in, but it does just like the one thing that stood out to me on paper is Long Shao is the slightly bigger guy. He's the younger fighter and he's got more professional experience. So if he flipped to the underdog, he would fit some system criteria for me. But it's not an easy fight for me to call, right? It's two guys that I'm not super familiar with. So tape will be my king on this fight. An hour and 20 minutes in the bag. This has been my first look. If you guys are new here, my name is Liam. I pick fights on the channel each and every week. You can find my work tracked third party at betmma.tips/Liam-Heslin. You can find all my work on Patreon if you're looking for my write-ups, my bets, as well as all my information, my resource documents, fight tape documents that I've made. Some of these like 5 years ago at this point on these fighters, that I still update to this day with different, tape and stuff that I'm watching. And if you guys want to ask questions, comments, concerns live, always feel free to hit me up on there. So thank you guys so much for the support. I want to ask everybody who's watching, do me these simple favors. Support on social media. If you can find me at LiamPicksFights everywhere, I appreciate that. If you enjoy the content we do here, let a friend know about the show. Drop a like on the video, helps the algorithm. Also, comment on the show. It's going to help other people start a conversation, right? Make friends with people down in the comments below. We support all that. And just get subscribed, guys, because we're going to be back coming to you guys tomorrow, 3:00 in the East. Stay tuned for the announcement. We got our guy, Rich, back in the building. Just win, baby. So it should be a fun show. Should be a lot of banter to be had. And guys, we got plenty more to discuss coming up in the very near future. June is a busy month for combat sports. We got a lot more fights on deck. I just want to do this one time before we get out of here, guys, which is we're going to show our stats on the screen, okay? Because we believe in transparency on this show, all right? And a lot of people, will denigrate me sometimes in the comments. What the fuck do you know? Why do you talk about this? What gives you the right? This is all I do, okay? I love talking about these fights. So if you don't mind, guys, look on the screen for me. 161 units of profit at a 9% ROI. I've been doing this for years upon years, okay? Now, let's scroll down, okay? All my events tracked. I've been doing this since 2020. People can look right here, 2020. I was a losing gambler. I'm not afraid to tell you that. I came out. I started talking about this stuff. I loved fights. I thought I knew a lot about it. And I was not very good at betting on fights. That's a unique set of skills. That takes reading all the fucking books that are sitting above me on the shelf. And that's the truth, okay? So when I have now all these years of profit under my belt, it's not because of an accident. It is in part because of luck, but it's also because I put in a lot of time, effort, and energy. I really try my best in terms of my working habits to be one of the best people at picking fights, at betting on fights, and they're different, okay? So I do my write-up, my article every week, last week in my article, I picked Garrett Armfield via unanimous decision. I said I thought his paths to winning the fight were via decision and knockout. And if you look in the fight, he was having a lot of success. But I also bet before the fight on Patreon, Brady Highstand round 3, the fight ends via submission, and Brady Highstand via submission. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I knew that the numbers were off. I was like, if Brady wins this fight, it's going to have to be a comeback. He's going to have to submit this guy. It's going to have to be late in the fight when the other guy gets tired. And so that's the way that you turn knowledge of fighting into profitable gambling information. And you go fight by fight and you try and do that. And guys, sometimes you have to understand there'll be plus EV looks that don't hit. That's part of the business. But all I'm looking to do is place more good bets, place fewer bad bets, and come back and do it all again next week. Because I know that if I place good bets, I will make profit over the long term. If I focus too much on one event or one cross section, you're going to lose sight of the big picture, right? So right now I have a 20+% ROI on the year. I don't expect that to maintain because I've been tracking my stuff for a long time. That's very difficult to do, but that's my goal, is to keep it going with the best amount of best bets that I can and not forcing any bullshit. If I believe in it, I bet it. And if I don't believe in it, I don't bet it. So last week, people wanted to give me grief about Weston Wilson. Why'd you spend 12 minutes talking about Weston Wilson on the show? Because I thought he had a chance to win. Okay. And sometimes I'll do that and I'll be an idiot. I'll do that about Jesse Butler, right? But when you're talking about plus 300s and plus 500s, you don't need to get them right every time to be a profitable gambler. So I'm not trying to be like, bet on every underdog every time. Just pick the underdogs. Fuck what everybody says. It's about selectivity. The reason I'm a good gambler over the long term is because I know when to pick my spots. So long term, that's what we're looking to do. If you want to join the team, God bless. If not, keep supporting over here on YouTube. I appreciate the support, however it comes. If you guys want to interact on social media, you can find me there. You can find me in the comment section below. And otherwise, you can find me here again tomorrow, having the same fun again. Thank you all. God bless you all. Come back next time, and we're doing it all. Thanks, guys.